Barry's International Relations Committee has been doing a great job building bridges with the rest of the world. Barry has exchange programs with sister and friendship cities in Japan, Germany, France, and the United Kingdom. However, these relationships do not reflect changing Barry demographics and the world. For example, Georgian College has more than 1,000 international students, but they do not have sufficient representation on the committee. I talked to the chair of International Relations Committee since 2000, Dave Morrison, about the committee work and importance of engaging with the world. For his exceptional work, he has received the highest award that Japan can offer a foreign citizen. Hi Dave, how are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Good, good. Thank you so much for your time.
Not a problem.
Yeah,
How can I
yeah.
help?
You were a history and political science teacher at Innisdale Secondary School before founding, Youth Ambassadors International Inc. and becoming the chair of International Relations Committee. So, what inspired you to do this transition?
Well, inspiration frequently is as simple as an opportunity meets an idea. And I know that sounds cliche or trite, but I mean, I've always been involved with young people. That was my career. I taught at Innisdale for 33 years or something. So at one point, we had already started this relationship with Zweibrücken, which I had supported as a member of council. And it was 1997. And the Japanese were keen to start an exchange of people other than politicians, which I thought was great. And they wanted to start with youth. And the mayor at the time, who was a wonderful individual, one of my best friends, Mayor Janice Laking, was speaking to another member of council, Alderman Black, who was also a good friend of mine. And I overheard one of them say that, well, they're just going to have to turn it down because no one knew how to get kids involved. And I only discovered later that they had set me up because we were having a drink at the time. And I said, what are you talking about? And they said, well, we don't know how to get young people involved in wanting to go to Japan. And I said, ask them, set the number, pick the ones and go. It's not hard. At that point, to jump ahead from there, I created Youth Ambassadors Program, which started with exchanges to Murayama in 1997 and continues to this day. And then shortly thereafter, I started the Global Perspectives Program at Innisdale, which is an academic cultural program that takes an entire class of students selected from all across our Board of Education to Zweibrücken, Germany for a month, and the Germans come and live with us for a month. So it works well. So all of this fits nicely in this international relations aspect. I became a member of it in 97, sort of there at the beginning. And then I became chair of it. The original chair was Alderman Rob Warman, and he left council in 2000. And so at the time, because we were still building, it was thought that it would be better if there was that the political presence on what was a citizens voluntary committee would then should then be a politician. And so I agreed to chair it. And so I've been chair since 2000. And I retired from politics in 2003. And it was decided then the committee should select whomever they want. And since then, the committee has selected me after every transition. And this is done once a term at the beginning, once we appoint the new committees after municipal elections. So that's sort of the background to it. And since then, I don't know whether you're aware, but we have grown with more and more sister cities and extensive programs, and we're very excited about that. We've added Harrogate, the borough of Harrogate in the United Kingdom, and most recently Arras, France. And unfortunately, our great plans with Arras, France, because they were the last one we did, have all been put on hold thanks to COVID. I mean, no one's doing a lot of international traveling at the moment. However, we're keen to get back at it.
Yeah, no, that's great. So you received Japanese government's one of the highest honors for the exchange program you started in just before the pandemic. It's called the Order of Rising Sun, Gold and Silver Rays Imperial Decoration. So how did that come about? So what kind of exchange you had during the program, and how do you feel about the award?
Well, first of all, I'm incredibly honored by the award. It's the highest award that Japan can offer on a foreign citizen.
Yeah.
It's quite astounding to me. Literally, I was shocked when I discovered that that I'd been nominated for it and had been selected. We had been working closely with the Consul General, the Consul General of Japan in Toronto. She had become very, very supportive of the sister city programs across Ontario. She had come to Barrie. We'd spent an entire day traveling around with her, showing all the different aspects of how that program interacts with our community, and I mean everything from Japanese Canadian industries that were in town employing Barrie citizens, through to we attended a Skate Canada performance that evening, and were greeted by, there was a Japanese figure skater. Turned out the Consul General of Japan was a huge figure skating fan, and the fact that the Mariposa School had allowed this Japanese figure skater, one of the best in the world, to progress through them. These are all just ties that made sense. So after that, she had invited all the chair people of Japan sister cities to a kind of a working luncheon with the Lieutenant Governor of Ontario at that time, Pauline McGibbon. And we all talked about our experiences, and I suggested that we should form a longstanding committee. The purpose of it would be to simply share our ideas with each other and constantly ensure that the Consul General was aware of what we were doing. Because unless the Consul General does the research, it's not like they're on some mailing list we produce. I mean, it was just that this relationship actually began very organically for us. And so that was the plan. And so once again, that was my lead into this. And she was obviously very impressed with what she saw had happened, and the Youth Ambassadors program that had started with Murayama, although had expanded with others as well. And I'm assuming that that's where it came from.
Yes. So uh, till date, how many exchange program, how many visits have been taken place across these different programs?
Well, it's difficult to say the exact number. I mean, I could literally, if had I known you were going to ask that, I could sit down and count them. I can tell you that with exception of obviously the COVID one that has shut us down for the last 2 years, and we had the same problem with SARS and whatever the flu was before that, bird flu, avian flu, something.
Yeah.
So what happened was, except for that, the Japanese community, Murayama, wanted to do what we call a home and away. In other words, they come to Canada for 2 weeks, the first part of August, and we go the following year for 2 weeks, the end of the last 2 weeks of August. And so basically from 1997 till now, we've gone every 2 years, with the exception of those years that we were not allowed to because of because of problems with illnesses and pandemics.
Yeah. And how many students, you say, how many students participate in?
Sorry, I was about to get to that. So it's we take a delegation of up to 12 every year, or every delegation is up to 12 with 2 leaders. And when we do global has been in operation since with its travel component since 99-2000. So we've done 21 years of exchanges with Zweibrück in Germany. And then we've also engaged with now this is not a sister city program, but we've been involved with interchanges with the global kids doing Cuba through the University of Matanzas, and that's been going on for about 15 years.
Awesome.
So and that program is now, I mean, I've retired from actually physically running that program. I mean, that's now in the good hands of Mr. Jeff Toole. He's the program coordinator of Global Perspectives now, and he's got an excellent teacher team, and they've done a superlative job of keeping the academic version of it alive, while I have promised to deal with the financial end of it by endlessly raising money in the community. Because there's two things I want to comment on that I think are important, so that you can do the numbers. There's 28 kids per class. We've been doing it for 20 years. I mean, work out the number. And by the way, we also believe it affects the family significantly as well. I know that the last time I made a presentation to council, someone who was not me had taken the assumption that for 28 kids, there are going to be 28 other kids from the other country involved, which takes us to 56, and then they're in families. So we're really talking about affecting you're talking probably 200 or 300
Correct. Yeah.
people that are involved in each one of our exchanges. So it very quickly adds up to thousands. All right. The direct participants is well over 1,000. Okay. The two other points I'd want to make, and it's going to lead to a third one. The first one is that although we have many other programs with regular citizens, adults, dealing with all of our different exchange programs, King Edward Choir has done exchanges. I know there's been some hockey exchanges. We're trying to work on a rugby exchange now with Harrogate. But I primarily, up till now, have been focused on the youth part of it. And one of the other I believe, most significant aspects of it is that I believe that if we're going to be truly successful about cultural diversity and anti-discrimination and anti-racism, we need to actually ensure that our young people, when I started all of this, was a very white bread European community. All right. We need to ensure that they get to understand that not everybody looks like them or acts like them and has different beliefs and different cultural ideas. And at the end, people are people. And so my philosophical view is rather simplistic, but I believe that if we create situations through cultural immersion, which guarantees that young people have an opportunity to interact with, on a very personal level, people that speak a different language, that are a different color, that have a different religion, that do different things, that type of situation, that we're allowing them to build friends. And I believe that, and I was kind of trained this many, many years ago through an organization called Children's International Summer Villages. The concept is simplistic, but is functional.
Yeah.
If you have a friend in another country, no government or company or organization will ever convince you to hate that country, because that country will remain the home of your friend.
Yeah. Very well said, yeah.
And I truly believe that that's true. So the more we do that, but I think it has to be literally, it's got to be hands-on. I don't think that type of emotional, psychological, meaningful experience can happen through books or through teachers teaching or that type of thing. I think there needs to be an immersion in what the differences are. And we've had incredible success with our programs, especially in Cuba, in Japan.
Yeah.
Yes, I understand Germany's another Western European country, but they're going through the same massive changes Canada are in terms of the makeup of their population. And more importantly, it's significant to understand that the Sister City program was started with the support of Winston Churchill and Dwight D. Eisenhower, from the base concept that the first sister city should always be with your former enemies, because it was more important to create friends where you didn't have them than it was to renew friendships. Not that that's unimportant. So we took that verbatim. And so we did Germany first, and then we did Japan. And then since then we've added England and France. So culture is not just a matter of race or religion. I think it's important to get to the basics. And we learned an enormous amount by going to Germany and seeing how the different generations of Germans reacted to World War II. So that's been a broad emphasis on the youth, has been this idea of fostering the type of people we want to be recognized nationally and internationally and acting locally as Canadians. So that's been a fundamental aspect of what we're doing. That was the first of two things. Do you want to say something, or
No, no, go ahead. Yeah.
The second thing is, from the very beginning, I have been adamant that yes, the participant is the obvious beneficiary, but the community benefits in so many ways that I made a promise when I started, and that's held true to this day, that we take the best kids, not the richest kids. So, and how do I make that something more than a slogan? From 1997 until literally this day, I have raised money every year in order to make sure that young people that came from financially disadvantaged families would have the opportunity to have this experience. And yes, families that can afford to pay should bloody well pay. I mean, they can do it. And so for the first few years, literally, it was me banging on the same doors of the same companies that had been supportive of us throughout the years. And it ran the gamut from Jamie Massey with his Georgian International and Pontiac Empire, and through to builders that have been fantastic with us over the years. We've just been very, very fortunate that people have been willing to write a check. A while ago, literally 6 months before COVID hit, I came up with an idea, because now that I'm retired, I've moved to my cottage in Wasaga Beach. And so at the end of this term, I'm no longer a citizen of Barrie. I don't think it's appropriate for me to continue as chair of this committee. Although, to be fair, it's been made clear to me by every politician that walks and breathes in Barrie that, given the honor from Japan, if I wanted to continue doing it, in that position, they'd be happy for me to stay. And that's very kind of them, but I just think it's time. All right. Now, I'll still be involved, because as I attempted to plan for the future, I invented something called the Youth Ambassadors Legacy Fund. And so what we've done is we've gone out and we were just starting when COVID hit. We'd only been doing it for like 3 months, but we're using the Barrie Community Foundation, and we're creating this legacy fund that will hopefully collect enough money to then, through investments and whatever, self-perpetuate this, so that 30 years from now, when I'm dead and gone, we will still be able to fund the less financially fortunate through this. And we got off to a great start. I mean, 3 months into it, and I won't bother you with the details of how I was going to different groups at different times. I had a schedule in terms of who I was going to hit first. And at any rate, we had original goal of $100,000. But as COVID hit, and I was still working on my first introductory layer, which were former students. Now, admittedly, a few people had found out about it, and a few parents who would be in a later group had jumped on board. And there was one massive family contribution. But the reality is, we were at $47,000 raised towards our $100,000 goal.
Wow.
When COVID hit. Now, naturally, I shut it all down, and the money's just been sitting there invested or waiting for more to happen, because I think it would be irresponsible of me, when so many families were being challenged during COVID, for me to be asking for money, especially when the money would be for a program that technically doesn't need the money at the moment, because no one's going anywhere.
Yeah.
So I mothballed the enterprise. And then when we are finally able to travel again, which may or may not, I don't know whether we'll be comfortable enough, parents will be comfortable enough to start this up again in 2022. I'm very confident that this will be sort of back in business by 2023.
Yep.
At which point I'll be comfortable going back and raising the money and doing that kind of thing. And at that point, I think I would continue my involvement in this by continuing to manage the legacy fund aspect of it, which at this point, because it's brand new, does not actually have a seat on the International Relations Committee. But at some point between now and the next election, I'll be asking council to do that. So those are the two important points: cultural immersion to help form the type of cultural equality and intercitizen positivity that we need. And the second one is to ensure that it's open to all youth, not just the rich. So those are the two critical parts. Now, I promise, God, I'm talking all the time. You're going to be bored stiff with all this, but
No. This is go ahead.
the third and final thing that I mentioned is actually separate from the city. There's an old saying that says that when you retire, the happiest people who retire to something, not from something. I loved being a teacher. I loved my classroom. I loved my programs. I loved what I was doing. I mean, I stayed literally in the same school in the same position for 30 some odd years and never tried to climb the ladder because I didn't have any interest in, I mean, I might have tried the department head at one point, but my point is I was happy doing what I was doing. But I saw an opportunity. My time was up, and I decided to form. Actually, it was going to be an NGO, but it turned out being a company because the rules for a business are much easier than the rules for an NGO, which is a whole nother story I could tell you, but I'm sure you're not interested. So I created a small business and called it Youth Ambassadors International, and I did that to honor. There's a woman that helped me form Youth Ambassadors program through the city, a woman by the name of Sandra Purchase. She was the yin to my yang. I mean, she and I brought completely different set of skills to it, and we just meshed perfectly, and she was brilliant in all aspects of it. And together, we formed the Youth Ambassadors program. And unfortunately, she passed away a number of years ago. And I've always wanted to honor her in many ways, and I have done so in my speeches and in my articles and whatever. But when I started the company, I kind of forgot that I might actually be making things confusing for people. But I decided to call it the Youth Ambassadors International because that was the name, Youth Ambassadors, that she had chosen for our program originally.
Okay.
So, and in fact, if you go on to my website, youthambassadorsinternational.com, or .ca, you'll find that in the background stuff, there's a big long thing that I've written that explains that exact same story. The purpose of this now is that I wanted to expand beyond my school. So yes, this was going to take over dealing with some of the global trips to Cuba, but we had a great relationship with the University of Matanzas in Cuba. And we were looking to expand to 2 other Caribbean possibilities in places such as Jamaica, Costa Rica, none of which had happened yet, to be fair. But we've been very involved with Cuba. And literally, the last trip I ran through my business was through the Barrie Elites girls volleyball program, their girls under 17 or maybe under 18 program that was coached by Mike Tuck, decided to take this as their trip. And it was a phenomenal success. They went down for 6 days, but they crammed it all in between end of exams in semester 1 and the start of semester 2. And there's a special athletic school in Matanzas. So they played girls teams their same age that were the best athletes in Matanzas, in the province of Matanzas. My only point is it was phenomenally successful. And what I look to do in retirement is to continue what I did in my own classroom and in my own city, but on a larger scale by offering these cultural immersion programs in not just academic stuff, but in athletics, the arts, academics, whatever type of group might be interested in doing it. In fact, we even took an adult group of former parents that were interested in doing it, seeing what their kids had gone through. And that was one of the first ones I ran after retirement. I think we did that in 2016. So the purpose of my telling you that is to simply understand that this concept of these youth, particularly youth, but any type of international exchange, provides extraordinary opportunities. And if I had the energy left to do one big thing between after my job, then I would start a company, and that's what it would focus on. And I don't make any money from it. I wish I did, but I don't. But fortunately, I'm not reliant on that to pay a mortgage or whatever. So, so yeah, so that's sort of the background of all of that. So
Yeah, no, that's interesting. And going back to your explanation about these different programs, and you mentioned that most of the programs are Europe centric, except the Japan and Cuba. So I was curious about, and you mentioned a couple of Caribbean countries where you plan to expand the program. So how do you see the future of because what I see, these programs are mostly the immediate post-war World War II alliances that come into existence. It doesn't really reflect the changing world. For example, there's a China or India or Africa is not present in this program. So are there any plans to expand to those countries?
well, actually, we already have. So first of all, I can't repeat frequently enough that there is a difference between the Youth Ambassadors Program and what it does within the International Relations Committee in the city of Barrie, and the Youth Ambassadors International, which is my business, all right, which is doing the majority of the Cuba stuff now.
Yeah,
Kansas, Cuba is not a sister city of the city of Barrie.
that's correct.
So just it's important to keep them separate in our minds.
Yeah.
In 2001, maybe 2000, we created a partnership with Taizhou, China.
Mm-hmm.
And unfortunately, that went fine until we had to cancel for things like SARS and avian. And they were very, very sensitive to that, because you may recall that both of those, much like COVID, were seen to come out of China at the time. And although neither I nor anyone in our program said anything about that, they were not impressed that we were the ones that canceled. I mean, to be fair, with Japan, it was Japan that canceled, but we were the ones that canceled with China. And the plan originally with China was a home and away, so that we would host Japan one year and we would host China the next year, all right, and have different delegations of kids. It went several years. I mean, I think it continued until about 2000 and I think it went on till about 2007. So about 7 or 8 years. Yeah. And it was somewhere in there that things started getting confusing with these different diseases. But then, unfortunately, they kind of disappeared. We don't really know why. Suddenly, whatever interest they had, I know that our mayor went and did a trade delegation. But we also know that the federal government had been aggressive about the Chinese were taking advantage to some, according to our federal government, about using the municipalities to get visas. And then the Chinese would shorten their stay in the municipality and use the rest of the visa time to go shopping or go elsewhere. So following that, and this happened in a number of communities, and I don't know how well you know the Chinese culture. There's not a lot of confrontation. What there is just absence. So basically we created a category that's called in abeyance. And I haven't canceled the program with China. Every year I send a letter to them indicating our interest in restarting this, and I've never had a response. But we keep it in abeyance, which means the purpose of that is so we don't have to go through all of the nonsense necessary to start all of these, because there's a quite bureaucratic process. The other one that's interesting is that, and it speaks to the future of this, and whomever should be engaged with your media company and hear this should be aware of this as well. um, all of these have started with community groups that indicated the interest. So for instance, the German Canadian Club in Barrie, with several very active members, including Alderman Rob Warman, who had been stationed at the Canadian base in Zweibrücken in the 60s, and Jean-Maurice Pigeon, who literally, those two have been the workhorses on the adult version of the Zweibrücken exchange. Well, it started because they came and asked the mayor at the time to do this, and they had done their homework. So if we move through this, they all kind of start that way. Muriam is a little bit different because there isn't a Japanese community that is was orchestrated and organized enough to come to us, but it was the Japanese Mayors Association that came to us, and we did that. In other situations, the one outstanding one that I want to mention to you, because I think it's important, is that the Philippines, there's a very strong Filipino community in Barrie.
Mhm.
And so a group of them came to us. And in fact, the member of parliament at the time was Patrick Brown, and he directed them to us. And so what we attempted to do was, they wanted to have a sister city, and they established that it would happen to be one of the cities in Palawan in the Philippines, and which was great. All right, so we did all the stuff we could do on our end. We approved it. We got council to approve it. We wrote out the documents and the formal scroll and all the certification needed. But they have a different political system over there, and I don't remember the specifics, but the mayor has to sign the documents for it to work. Well, they have a system whereby they change mayors with great regularity, and they won't accept emails as official documents. So in the time it takes to get letters back and forth,
Mhm.
all right, like I have to admit, it was a learning experience for me, because I'd forgotten how long it takes to get actual physical letters all over the place. I've been working almost exclusively by email for, like, I don't know, 15 years. At any rate, we could never get that document signed.
Yeah.
And so without it, we had no way of moving forward. So in the end, once again, although from very different background, what we said to the community was, with your permission, we're going to put this in abeyance. And if you'd like to work on it in the background with our committee's support, and I gave them a bunch of the necessary letters with the letterhead and with my signature and whatever, if you can get them to sign on, we're good to go. I mean, no one's opposed to this.
Yeah.
But they've got to do their side. So it's not, so there's two aspects to this. The first one is, obviously, it's not all on us. The other side has to be willing to be engaged in this as well. But the other part that I think is even more important is that all of this started with and continues to be basically responding to community interest. So I'm virtually certain that if there was a community, I'm not going to mention a country because I don't want to pick something out of midair, but if there was a community in Barrie that had roots in either another place in Asia, in Africa, wherever, and they wanted to come to us with an idea, we'd be all open ears, because, and I say we because the entire committee is as committed to this as I am.
Mhm.
I agree totally. I mean, you're right. It does sound like there's a disconnect with all of this Western European stuff and my talking about cultural immersion sensitivities and significance. But in fact, there have been other efforts, and and we're open to them in the future.
Maybe that question should be for the upcoming chair. Maybe I should.
Well, I'm not gone yet. I mean, if somebody were to hear or see this and suddenly say, well, we've got the whatever Canadian Society and we could do this, and they're happy to, I mean, at some point, I hope you'll pass on my name and my contact information. If anybody in the community has an interest or wants to have further knowledge in it,
Yeah.
they can either try to, work with me to start a new one, or work with the new chair a year from now, or they can, maybe they've got an interest in volunteering for some of the stuff we do. These are all possibilities.
Yeah, yeah, no, that makes sense. Because the reason I was asking, because if we see the recent developments, the arrest of the Meng of Xiaomi and in Vancouver, and the relationship. So it feels like we are going back into time where the relationship between the West and the rest of the world is kind of becoming more fragile. If you see what the comments made by Trump about Africa and other countries. So that was my main concern, is what can be done to not go back to 1940s and 1930s, where there were European alliances, and that was my question. So that leads to the next point, is the composition of the international relations committee. And I see the most of the members, and you said that that reflects the Barrie community, but most of the members I see are white, Caucasian. And one of the concern I had was about Georgian College. I don't know if you recently read, a couple of days back there was an article in the Globe and Mail about how international students, specifically coming from India, pay a lot more higher fees, and they don't get that much support in Canada. So in terms of diversifying the international relations committee in terms of membership, and engaging more with the international students who are non-white. So what do you think can be done in that direction?
Well, let me help complete your research. There are, in fact, for instance, Georgian College has a voting member on our
Yeah,
board.
dean of the one person, but she's again a white female, but she's the employee. I was more thinking about the
And
student body, or
And if I can complete my thought,
yeah.
she usually sends an individual, a Japanese individual named Kenta Shirakawa, who represents Georgian quite regularly. And in fact, we had just selected him as the male leader of the next delegation from Barrie going to Murayama, Japan.
Yeah.
So that's the first aspect of it, is we are aware of Georgian College, and we are connected with them through these positions are all this organization or designate. So yes, it's Leslie Paulson, but it's whomever she designates. And most of the last few years, it's been Kenta. He's a wonderful young man. You should talk to him. But in addition to that, you have to understand the makeup of this. The makeup of the committee is based on a subcommittee process.
Yeah.
All right. So what happens is that there are 3 representatives from each of the subcommittees. So there's a subcommittee that does Harrogate, UK, and there's a subcommittee that does Wybrooke, and so consider them silos in that old example. These are separate silos, but their money and their permission all comes from the overall governing body, international relations. Those silos, those different committees, subcommittees, they step into the IRC governing committee, they're selected from there. All right. So for instance, when the Filipinos were keen on putting together the partnership with Puerto Princesa, which was the name of the city we were going to partner with in the Philippines, the members from that subcommittee were obviously Filipino. All right. So there's a background. 2 of the 3 representatives for Arras, France, are French speaking, and actually 3 of them are French speaking, and 2 of them are actually a French background. All right, French Canadian background. So the effort's being made, but as the number of opportunities expand, the opportunity for the diversification within those committees also expands. All right. So, I mean, I think it's natural that people that are part of a German Canadian society in Barrie would be most interested in joining that particular subcommittee.
Yep.
Now they're not joined, all right, and that's why I talked about volunteerism, because I don't think any of I know that none of these subcommittees would be opposed to having volunteers, all right, that represent the emerging vision of Canadians. It's just that there hasn't been a natural link, except for the ones that were there through the Japanese. For instance, the Japan, Hiromi Noguchi, has been a mainstay with that committee from its very beginnings. So my point is simply that while it may appear from the outside looking in that it's a bunch of white folk dealing with white folk, it's an unfair summation, because other efforts have been made. It takes two to tango. The Chinese have disappeared, and the Filipinos did not have not organized themselves on their end. We have invested time, money, and people, resources to the development of both of those. And we are open to any group representing a community. Now, it has to have an international, I mean, there's only two ways of doing this. Either they come as a group wanting to create a group, create a new sister city in somewhere in Asia or somewhere in Africa or somewhere, wherever, South America, or they let us know that they want to volunteer.
I see.
And we organize, we see which ones they might be interested in doing and connect them with that. I have to warn you in advance that the volunteer component of it, these things take a long time to develop, like whatever events are taking place. So it may not be, there may not be an immediacy. There's not an instant gratification thing with being a volunteer here, as opposed to being a volunteer in many of the social help agencies. I mean, we're busy planning for 2023. Now, sure, there's a lot of stuff that happens when the Japanese come to town, or when, you know, when the Germans, when we go to Germany, there's all kinds of opportunities there. But to be part of the building block process, you need more patience than you do energy, if that makes sense to you.
Yeah, no, you're right. So that's what I was trying to understand, and I understand that, you know, the composition of the committee is decided by the city council, for example. So maybe I can reach out to the city council in order to understand that what can be done. I understand there are the subcommittees, and each subcommittee has up to 3 members, and, you know, those are nominated. One of these members of the committee is the city councillor, which is, you know, deputy mayor ward in this case. But what I'm trying to understand is, and I'm not necessarily, you know, asking you the question, but what I'm trying to understand is what can be done, you know, in order to have more representation. Let's say, just instead of having just one person from or 2 persons from Georgian College, because Georgian College has more than 1,000 international students. So what can be done, you know, because this is the International Relations Committee, what can be done to make them welcome, you know, invite them to the committee, you know, hear their voices, and maybe I can, you know, reach out to the councillor, to the mayor, in order to you know, understand that further.
So with respect, I think you're misunderstanding the purpose of the International Relations Committee. That's not part of our mandate at this point. Our mandate is to foster and run the sister city programs and youth programs as they've been designed. Now, just as Kenta was going to be the leader for the Youth with Ambassadors program, I mean, they're more than welcome to volunteer for the youth program and engage with us there. They're more than welcome to engage with any of these things. But what you sound to me as if you're suggesting is that you want to completely change the mandate of the International Relations Committee to make it, in your mind, more inclusive by adding bodies that don't look like me onto the committee, to which I'd say, to what purpose? We don't sit around and have discussions about anything other than what subcommittee is doing what. The International Relations Committee meets for an hour a month, and the only purpose of it is to pass motions to control budget and to pass money for these subcommittees. There's nothing else happening except through the subcommittees. Okay, so unless these people, and I've said, I'll say it again because I've said it 20 times, anyone that wants to be involved is welcome to be involved.
Yeah.
All right. But they need to be involved in support of the mandate we have. And the mandate we have is the sister city programs and the youth programs. Okay. So there's no there's no other method if they're not engaged with the sister cities or with the youth. There's nothing to, I mean, there's nothing to approach council with other than a desire to completely change the mandate of the International Relations Committee.
I'm not necessarily, suggesting that it should change or not change, or not necessarily add members, who doesn't look like you. What I'm trying to understand is, and I understand that there is a mandate. That's what I said. There is a mandate, and within which you as the chair of the as the committee work. But I'm trying to understand is specifically after this article came out, and specifically, understanding the changing. What I'm trying to understand is there anything that needs to be done, can be done, in order to have more representation from international students community, for example. And I'm not necessarily asking you the questions, and I'm just trying to understand myself, that is this committee needs to evolve, or is this what needs to be done. These are just my curiosity about what needs to be changed or not changed, and just understanding those things. So I
Okay.
completely, so just the last point I had, and you mentioned about the German committee and the program. And I few months back, I was working on an article, and I talked to Susan Neiman. She's a Jewish American person who now lives in Germany, and she wrote a book saying, learning from the Germans, race and memory of evil. So she was like, what the rest of the world can learn from Germany, the way they faced and accepted their past, atrocities and Holocaust against Jewish people. And she was talking with reference to US, and she said, in the US, because she's American, in the US, there needs to be more acknowledgement about the native indigenous land that has been taken, and the slavery. So and then I asked her about Canada as well, because Canada has similar history of atrocities against indigenous people, and we know a lot of part of Canada still, the land has not been succeeded by the indigenous people. So in terms of what are the things you think that Canada, and specifically these delegations can learn when they go to Germany, and can Canada come up and accept that past, and more vocal about that, you being a history and political science teacher.
I'm sorry, was there, I missed the question. Could you repeat?
Yeah, so the question is, pardon?
Could you repeat the question, please?
Yeah, so my question is, should Canada be more accepting of its atrocities against indigenous people, the way Germany accepted its atrocities against Jewish people, and try to correct those monuments and compensation and like that?
Well, you're going to be disappointed in my answer, because I'm going to tell you that it has nothing to do with my role as chair of international relations, and so I don't have an opinion on that. I mean, Dave Morrison, the individual taxpayer in Canada and the former history teacher and former member of council, has an opinion. But that's not the purpose of this interview. This interview is about my role. It's actually about international relations and our role with that. And I've already talked about what we learned in Germany, and how we internalize that to have significant meaning for our young people. But I don't think it's my role to express an opinion about, because international relations is not involved in the internal political relationships in Canada. We never have been.
Okay, because this is an exchange program, students go there, so they learn about the culture, right? So they learn about the German culture, German history. When do this interaction, I'm sure they visit sites, various sites. So is there an attempt when they visit the site to tell them what is the significance of those sites? So what do they go, and what do they learn when they go to Germany?
Well, there's obviously a great deal of significance in, or an effort to ensure they understand the significance of these sites, both to the Germans and to the larger topics, such as the concentration camps we visit and a variety of other things. But I mean, when the German students come here with Global, we do make a very strong effort to have them interact with some of our native heritage or Aboriginal heritage, and but the reality is that it's extremely important. We need to be very careful that, and I'm a big believer in this, that we need to stay in our lanes. All right, and it's not the International Relations Committee's role. And in fact, I'll go stronger than that. It would be entirely inappropriate for me in that position to discuss any version of national or provincial or municipal politics. We deal exclusively with international, and what the kids bring home, they bring home, and we've been very successful in this program, and it has meant a great deal. And I mean, you're welcome. Well, actually, it's unfortunate. We've just pulled down the old websites, and we're about to launch a brand new one the beginning of January that has a bunch of stuff there. But one of the things that I did, if you wanted to get a sense of what was important to the students, both in Cuba and in Germany, if you go to my, if you chose to go to my Youth Ambassadors International website, on the very front page of it, you'll see series of quote testimonials. All right, from students, parents, and staff who basically say why this, and I told them at the time I was creating it, I didn't want them to say we had a good time. I mean, you can take your history class across the street to Lackey's Bush and they'll have a good time because they're not sitting behind a desk. I wanted to talk to it in more depth. And so they gave you very, very thoughtful answers. Questions about the significance of what they experience needs to be directed, in my opinion, to the students. Not to me, because to be fair, I can tell you the significance that these experiences had on me, and I can tell you what I might hope these experiences had on the kids, because I've already talked about cultural immersion, anti-racism, et cetera, et cetera. But the extent to which they were successful, that's in the hands of the students. Having stayed in touch with literally dozens of students over the years, if not hundreds of students over the years, I'm pretty confident that we did a very good job. One of the things we don't do, well, I don't do, I don't believe in inculcation. I don't believe that it's my job. I think you need to lay evidence out to people and they need to make their own decisions. And I'm very, very nervous about these efforts to modernize our systems so that the next generation thinks the way we want them to think. Now, arguably, we've already been doing that for decades. I understand that confusion, but I don't think two wrongs make a right. I don't think it necessarily is a positive step to go that direction. But with regard to international relations, we do what we do, and we do it internationally, or we host people coming from those countries here. And that's as much as I can talk about, in my opinion. So
no, that's totally fair. So thank you so much, Dave, for your time. It has been a pleasure talking to you and knowing about the committee and your work. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Dave. Have a nice day.
Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Yeah.